So again, if you've joined in the last minute or two, my name's Jake Allspaw. I'm the writing specialist and coordinator of tutoring services in the Center for Academic Achievement on main campus. And this is the APA Fundamentals and More workshop on APA style. Thanks for joining us. I thought I'd start by talking for just a minute about sort of what APA is broadly and how it relates to um, another citation style, MLA, because I think a lot of times we feel like we're memorizing things arbitrarily, and if we don't understand sort of where they're coming from, it feels like we're wasting memory cells, right? But so to inform kind of what APA is trying to do, I thought this some background knowledge would be helpful. But the biggest difference between these two styles is their emphasis on time. APA is very interested in the date, how up-to-date things are that get published, right? Whereas MLA is not very interested in that. A little bit, but not nearly so much. So you see that emphasized in the citation styles, right? So the date for APA comes right after the author because they're very interested in that. MLA, it comes at the very end of the citation. And the reason for that are the types of work that they do. So APA are hard sciences, nursing, as you guys already noted, um, psychology, and so when things are published matters a lot, right? So how up to date something can matter a ton, whereas MLA values time very minimally. They consider text and scholarship to be timeless. You can see that in how we still read like Aristotle, right? And that's still an important author. Um, so you might think of it in the terms of uh, an English major might be interested in Aristotle or Plato's ideas about rhetoric or philosophy, right? But we wouldn't be interested at all in their thoughts on anatomy or best practices in nursing, right? So APA is very interested in how up to date something is. So the date comes first. They're also minimally interested in traditional models of authorship in APA, so they see texts as collaborative and as building blocks to other texts, and that makes sense too. In the hard sciences, you have a lot of collaborative writing, building off of other texts, and things like that. MLA, exact opposite. They are concerned with a traditional model of authorship, so one author in the ivory tower, right, doing something genius, and they're concerned with maintaining his or her original meaning, eradicating plagiarism, that kind of thing. The author is absolute and unchanging, right? And in APA, they're highly concerned with formatting. So, and the reason for that is that a lot of APA works aren't meant to be read front to back, right? You might go to the methods section quickly and see if it makes sense. You might go to the results of a study and see what the results are. So they're very concerned with keeping things in order so it's skimmable and so it's digestible. So I just thought that'd be a helpful place to start in terms of what these different styles are sort of privileging and what they're trying to do. So there's four main uh, aspects of an APA paper. You've got your title page with a running head, page number, title, your name, your affiliation. For our purposes, that's LaSalle. And the course, if it is for a course. You have an abstract on the next page with a one-paragraph synopsis of the paper. Sometimes that's on the title page as well. And then you have a body, which is the content of the paper. That's where the meat is, right? And then references. So a list of all the sources that you used in the paper, not necessarily the ones that you consulted or read. You might have looked at 5 or 10 times as many sources as you actually used, but you only put in the sources that you literally used in the paper. This is an example of a title page done correctly. We've got the title of the paper, Effects of Writing Tutoring on Nursing Students as Paper Grades, our fictitious author, Jane Jones, and her affiliation is LaSalle. If this was for a course, I would be right there. And then we have our running head, which happens in all caps, and it's just an abbreviated version of the title. So a sample running head for this title might be Effects of Writing Tutoring on Grades. So that's the title page. So move on to in-text citations. I think that's where a lot of students tend to make mistakes. There are three things, 3 bits of information that need to be in your in-text citation. They are the author's last name, the date that they published on, and the page number that you're pulling from. And there's a few different ways you can do that. You could put it all in the parenthetical citation right here. So Smith, 2010, page 124. You could take some of that information and put it in the signal phrase. And when I say signal phrase, that's the part of the sentence that's not the quote. It's your words in the sentence that aren't the quote. So you might begin a quote with like, Smith noted, and then quote, right? Because you put Smith in the signal phrase, you don't need it in the parenthetical citation. So we've got Smith in the signal phrase, and I'm going to put the date and the page number in the parenthetical citation. Or you could pull even more information out. You could say, in 2010, Smith argued, put his quote, and then you would only need the page number in the signal phrase. Take note that authors can be corporations or government agencies as well. They don't have to just be people. So you might quote the Centers for Disease Control. And for quotations, you absolutely have to have a page number. For paraphrases, it's recommended, but not required. But for quotations, you definitely need name, date, and page number, all of that. Again, note that, well, here's a more full example of a sentence here that you might find in a paper. According to Jones, 2015, students often have difficulty with APA, page 199. So again, the author is in the signal phrase. Here we've got the date. They've chosen to move that up front. That's fine. You could also put the date here and the page number at the end, but those 3 bits of information. Or you might put everything in the parenthetical citation and nothing in the signal phrase as they've done here. She stated, quote, students often have difficulty using APA style, end quote, Jones 2015, page 199. Note that the correct way to format the sentence is to put the parenthetical citation inside the sentence, and by that I mean the period becomes after the parenthetical citation. So it goes, the parenthetical citation goes just before the period inside the sentence. So another example, long block quotes, which you may use. And the rules change a little bit for those. There's not great reasons why, but they do. For block quotes, you're not going to use quotations. I think that makes sense because it's set off to the side. You can see that it's something different. It's a quote, right? It's indented over. Any quote that's over 4 lines, you're going to do this to. Doesn't get quotation marks and gets indented over. The other thing that's different about them is that the parenthetical citation, you'll notice, moves outside of the sentence. So it's after the period. I don't know why APA is just messing with us, but that's the rule. Block quotations, citation goes outside of the period. Otherwise, things remain the same. You still want the author, you still want the date, and you still want the page number. So multiple authors. Yeah, in the hard sciences, this happens, right? You'll get co-authors, sometimes 3, sometimes 10 authors on a study, right? But for the simplest, multiple authors would be 2. So you always just cite both authors. If there's only 2, always cite both of their last names, and otherwise things more or less stay the same. Cullen and Kemp, 2011. So both their last names separated by an and, that's it. 3 to 5 authors is a little different, probably the most complicated. The first time that you cite them in your paper, you're going to cite all the authors. And you're going to do that with their last names. Thereafter, you're going to indicate first author and et al., which is a Latin abbreviation for and others. So the first time, cite everybody. All the times after that, just cite the first author. In this case, it's Taylor. et al., period, comma, and the date. For 6 more authors, every time you just use the first author and et al. So you don't need to do this first time, cite all authors. It's just too many when there's 6 or more. Every time you cite them, just last name, et al., date, Butler, et al., 2010. So move on to the reference page. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but only cite sources that you literally used in the paper. And you're going to list references alphabetically by last name, first author if there are more than one. So sometimes when you have multiple authors, be sure to keep those authors in the order in which they appear in the source. The first author is the person who's the most prestigious or did the most work, so we want to honor that by keeping them first, and you alphabetize it by the first author's last name if there's multiple authors. Again, keep the author sequence that appears in the source. Of course, attend to your details, the capitalization, italics, punctuation that we've been going over, and each source gets a hanging indent format, which means that the first line is left justified and all the other lines in that source are tabbed over one. And I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. So these are the components of each source citation on the reference page. You got a lot more information than in your in-text citations, right? You got the author or authors first, then comes the year. Most things you're going to be citing are articles. The article comes next. And then the container of the article, which are journals. And the journal information is going to include the volume, the issue, and the page range. So the first page hyphen last page. So the page range that the article takes up in the journal. I'll show you some examples. So here's a correct citation that only has one author. It's going to be last name, first initial, Smith J, period, 2008, period, educating suburbanites about lead poisoning, recent findings. That's the title of the article. Its container, its journal, is a journal called Nursing Research. The container always gets italicized. And then we're going to switch to commas, because this is all related information. This is all journal information. That's a way to help you remember to use commas here, not periods. And it's Nursing Research, volume 24, the third issue of 24, and the page range is 25 to 41, period, and that's it. 2 authors, everything aside from the authors is going to remain the same. But again, there's 2 authors, you cite everyone, so you're going to go last name, first initial, and last name, first initial, Smith, J, and Howard, A. And everything else would be the same. 3 to 5 authors, you're going to list all of the authors on your reference page. Same thing, last name, first initial, last name, first initial, last name, first initial, last name, first initial. 6 or more authors, things change a little bit. You're going to cite the first 6. Same thing, last name, first initial, last name, first initial, until you get to the 6th author, when you're going to stop, and you're going to use ellipses, the 3 dots. That represents all the authors in between the 6th one and the last one. So you're going to list the first 6, just as you did up here in the 3 to 5. You're going to go ellipses, and they're going to list the last author. And that's it. It's a notable exception. Things that go on the reference page are things that have been published. So if you're citing interviews or email communications, things like that, they do not go on the reference page because they're not published. However, they do get cited in the in-text citation, and they are called personal communications. So all you do is personal communication, the date that the communication happened on, that's it. Electronic sources, which will be most of the sources you cite, right? They'll usually be articles that are found in journals in online databases, things don't really change very much. It's all the same kind of stuff. Don't worry about putting the database in there. Students do get confused about what the container of an article is. The container is the journal. The container is not the database. So it doesn't matter what database you're in. It matters what journal the article originally appeared in. The only thing that's different is it's nice to find digital object identifiers if you are able. That's not always possible, but that comes at the very end of the citation if you can find it. A lot of times when we see articles online, we're looking at preview versions or we're looking at something that's linked. Scroll to the bottom and look for links to the original publication, the original place it appeared online. If you dig, you can find DOIs, and that's super helpful for anyone who's trying to read your work and figure out where you found your sources. DOIs will take them right there. So super simple. Everything stays the same. DOI, and then the number comes at the very end. Again, some DOIs are hidden in links to full articles. If you can click these links, they'll sometimes take you to the original, and you can find the DOI. So this is how to do the hanging indent. You can manually tab over all of the lines after the first line in a source, or you can do it this way. This is a little bit easier. Just highlight the whole source and go to, in Word, go to the paragraph icon. It's under Special and Hanging right here. And that will do a correct hanging indent. Some other just useful writing tips. Write for an informed audience for your research, but not an expert audience. So you don't want to assume that they know what you're talking about necessarily, but you want to assume that they are somewhat informed. Offer clear explanations, offer clear transitions between your ideas. I'll talk a little bit in a moment with some suggestions for how to do that. Of course, cite every source used. And I see a lot of students try to, I think these are attempted transitions. When they'll use you. Don't use you. Don't write in second person for your research. And don't use commands. I think what they're trying to do is to like move the reader almost forcefully because they don't know how to move the reader through their work. So they'll say something like, if you will look at figure 2 and the analysis on the second page, they're sort of narrating their way through the paper. That's attempted but weak transitioning, I think. So don't use you and don't tell the reader what to do. Instead, use some of these. Transitions are always about the relationships between ideas that are next to each other in a paper. So you want to think about what's paragraph A doing, what's paragraph B doing that's coming after it, and what's the relationship between those ideas. This pertains to sentences as well. So what's one sentence doing, what's the next sentence doing, and what's the relationship between those ideas. And your prose should help the reader understand what those relationships are. So sometimes you're moving from one point to another. So it's almost like addition. So you might say also or in addition. Sometimes you're switching directions, you're indicating contrast, right? So you might say, however, by contrast, still. I like still. It's a very simple word, but there's a lot bound up in it, right? It lets the reader know everything that came before, still, I'm switching directions, right? Sequence, sometimes things are chronological or you're moving through time, so next, last, then, first, right? Sometimes the next idea is offering an example of the one that came before, so you might say for instance or for example. And sometimes things are consequences of other things, right? So sometimes it's a cause and effect relationship, so you might say as a result, consequently, therefore. And again, remember that transitions can be words, they can be phrases, they can be whole sentences. So think about what's the relationship between ideas that are touching in the paper, that are adjacent, that are next to each other, right? And what is the relationship between those ideas? Your text should make that clear and explicit. Paraphrasing. So to protect yourself, you want to be careful about paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is essentially translating material into your own words while retaining the main idea. You don't want to do this by just swapping out in and out synonyms. That's called patch writing. You want to try to create your own sentence structure, so switch around where the verbs and the nouns are. You don't want to echo the exact sentence structure and just switch out synonyms. That could be considered plagiarism. Always cite your paraphrases. That goes a long way to help protect yourself from even accidentally coming across as having plagiarized, right? A really good trick to avoid this is just to not have the original source material in front of you when you're writing, because that we just want to copy it down, right? So I suggest taking notes on the original source material and then writing from your notes. That removes you a step and can help you avoid these pitfalls. And lastly, I think memorizing everything that has to do with a citation style is not very exciting. It's boring work, and it's eventually going to be a waste of brain cells because these citation styles change, right? We're on the 6th edition, I think, of APA, but there'll be a 7th, and things will change. So you don't have to memorize all of this, but you want to be armed to feel comfortable looking it up when you need to use it. And for that, I would highly recommend Purdue OWL, which is the online writing lab at Purdue University. Just Google it. It'll be the first thing that comes up. They have a full APA citation guide with all of this information that I've been going through, sample papers, sample title pages, sample reference pages, tips on writing abstracts, all of that good stuff. So go to Purdue OWL when it's time to do your reference page and do your citations, and it'll help you through it without having to memorize all this dry stuff. So that's what I have. I will take a few minutes here to answer any questions you guys have about your specific concerns with APA or how to cite a specific difficult text or something. So in the chat box, if you want, let me know any questions you have. I'd be happy to answer them.